Hello everybody. So, this is based on in part a 2022 project between Dr. MacGlone, as you see there, and Professor Raymond MacDonald. And they had a Royal Society network grant to investigate, firstly, the barriers to participation that exist for creative musicians from diverse backgrounds. And secondly, which artistic strategies and logistical aspects for improvising best serve the principles of a diversified and fully accessible space for creative practice. And, you know, that long sentence just means how can you get in, how can people get into the space and do what they want to do? Yeah, okay. They centred it around people who participated within the research, and those people created 5 new commissions which allowed 5 musicians from marginalised groups to explore challenges and possibilities in creating 2 work. 2 of them are here, Dr. Diljeet Bhachu and Dr. Mariam Rezai. These are 3 doctors, 3 improvisers.
Yeah, right. 4.
Oh, yeah, I am also. By the way, yeah, never gets mentioned actually, but yeah, I am one. Sometimes I just like to forget. You know, they're all improvisers, they're all researchers, they're all writers, and I think that, you know, there's an interesting commonality between them. However, there are differences here. So Una works with young people, community music, and creative strategies in terms of how people can access things on a number of different levels of need and abilities and capabilities. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Diljeet does freelance academic work, but you are an officer for the Diversity, Equality and Inclusion Officer for the museum, for the Musicians Union. Yeah. And I think your work has also looked at equality and participation within all sorts of spaces in the music sector.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. Mariam is an award-winning turntablist and is one of the major figures in terms of bringing the turntable to improvised music, having been commissioned and throughout. And I think your PhD was something about curatorial practice in terms of the old post hospital. Is that right?
It involved the old police house.
Old police house.
Yeah,
That's it,
and
yeah.
turntables.
And turntables.
Yeah.
So, and that's much more on the practice side of things. Is that right?
Absolutely,
okay?
yeah.
All right. Okay. I'll start reading. Okay, so I'm going to set out this space, okay, of where we're going to talk about, and it's going to be a freewheeling discussion, and I'm going to try to throw up some points, and there's other stuff that I might think about, and obviously you're allowed to ask questions. Just pop your hand up and I'll use your clothes to describe you. Right, okay, so here's the text. Improvisation, this is a word I very rarely say. Improvising is a rapidly growing area of interest for educational and cultural institutions. A number of artistic approaches to improvising have emerged where there's potential to tackle issues of politics, gender, race, economics, environment, community, and artificial intelligence. However, fixed conventions and views of creativity found in, for example, Western classical music, can provide the lens through which improvising is practiced and then conceptualized, privileging existing hierarchies. So improvising is really interesting, but in some areas improvising has been put in a hierarchy and normally at the bottom. Improvising, I've said this already, has itself been marginalised in the past, but as it moves to the mainstream, there's a danger of not questioning organisational systems and who gets to participate. For example, evidence for the exclusion of those with protected characteristics, gender, race, disability, etc., from academic discourse and practice in improvising have been outlined, but more work is required which centres the voice and experiences of artists from such groups. Are we all together so far? Okay, all right. So, this is a really interesting kind of space to think about. It's from a personal point of view, as an improviser that left the live performance space because of that marginalisation. Mm-hmm. So that's a really interesting thing, and I guess we don't really, there's that kind of wider discussion about where the curve is. I always think about the marginalisation as a curve, as a wall, and sometimes it curves away from you, and sometimes it curves towards you. So you're sometimes in the curve or you're out the curve, and there are ideals of not having that wall there at all. To be able to diversify that improvising space. So, but I think first of all, can we describe what work is being done so that everybody's up to speed, and then look at what the pitfalls are in that work? So I don't know which of you wishes to take that first. Well, tell you what, Mariam, why don't you have a go?
Okay. So, work that's being done. Well, firstly, I'm here now with Glasgow Improvisers Orchestra, which on one hand is like, yeah, of course that's a bit daft, I just said that, but actually I'm not from here. I'm from Newcastle. I travel all over with my performing, which I'm very fortunate to be at that place in my career, and I've been very kindly invited back. There are spaces, and there's being space made for someone like myself who isn't from this community, and if anyone knows me, you know how much I love Glasgow and Scotland, so I wish I was here. And that's a tremendous thing. It's also tremendous that it's outside of London. Can we just all thank God for that? It's a whole different thing there, and that's great that it exists, and it's so great that it exists elsewhere as well, and it's so strong and passionate here. And it's so amazing that Glasgow Improvisers Orchestra facilitate a community, for me, that involves me. Pitfalls. I don't have that community in Newcastle anymore, and there's a reason for that. It's because I stopped facilitating it. It was a pandemic. I did everything on a wing of a prayer, skin in your teeth, like literally for over a decade. And the pandemic and Brexit and the government has so much to answer for. So much to answer for. I just kind of keep doing it. I had to rebuild my career like everyone else did. It all stopped for how many months? And I just kind of do everything. But the second I stopped, I look at the bills in Newcastle, and I'm lucky if I see one woman on the bill. Don't talk about any other form of diversity. You'd be clapping your hands. Like, I'm still seeing all male, all white, all middle class, and then venues are complaining, oh, why aren't people coming here? Why is it always the same? So, well, you're not trying, and there's so many ways in which we need to diversify. So, another pitfall, we need to be looking at things geographically speaking and I don't think there's a one answer. I don't think there's one solution. I could sit and talk for days about this, so I'm going to pass it on.
I don't know how much more I can add other than, I guess from my vantage point of still feeling kind of new to improvisation as a space. I say that like I feel like I've been saying I've been new to it for like 6 years, but I don't know, maybe that's just time. But in that way, I feel like, especially through the project that we've been doing, that for me felt like the first thing I was aware of that looked at diversifying improvisation. And I think we had that conversation, didn't we? We were like,
absolutely, and we reached out to each other, not knowing each other, through online, and just had a chat.
Yeah,
just to be like, you look class, let's have a chat.
Yeah,
that's how it rolls.
But I think there's that thing of, that was it. It was, I'm not aware, and maybe that's partly just my lack of awareness. But it is, and I find it interesting in terms of, I guess, a way of looking at what pitfalls might look like. I find it interesting that when you then start to look a bit deeper, it's the same people, the same spaces in terms of like getting opportunities, or the people who are having conversations like yourselves. It's, you know, and it's that thing, and part of that is, I think that it is, again, from my vantage point, it is in one way quite, it feels like a close-knit circle. So yeah, that's part of why maybe the same name spaces come up. But on the other hand, it's, I think when we talk about labour of doing it, and again, that was something I really valued of the project, was how held it's felt in terms of having the space to talk about it, where I'm not, I mean, it's probably one of the few kind of EDI projects I've done in my life where I'm like, oh, I...
On the other side?
Yeah, well, on the other side, but also just kind of like having that space held. It's like, well, this is your space to talk or do something, and to not have to put the extra energy into pushing and leading the thing.
That Mariam was talking about in terms of like a scene falls apart if you're not the one who's doing it.
Totally.
That's a travesty. Honestly.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed.
Yeah.
I'm ashamed of Newcastle. I really am. It's my home. I worked so hard for so long to help facilitate and make something happen. And then I had to take rest. I had to do something for me for once. You know, I don't have a car, I don't have a house. I didn't have holiday. I did everything I could to help facilitate just this one space and a place to make things happen and include everyone. And then gone. And it's just
that ties into that. The pitfall for me is in terms of geo, like we've thought about diversity in terms of gender before, we've done concerts where we've been 50-50 or more than 50% women, all that type of thing, and we're like, this is great. And then if you don't keep thinking about it, it goes. And I think, you know, at the moment we're still doing well when you're looking at, you know, I don't know, other ensembles or a similar type in terms of the sort of percentages of women, but it's dropped from that 50-50. And I just wonder why, and I think there's something that needs to be done in terms of looking at, okay, we were at that stage at one point, so why are the women dropping away? We did a project with the Gaelic arts organisation Chaos Crack a couple of weeks ago, and the story was, it was pretty grisly. It was about witchcraft and a witchcraft trial on the island of Skye, and some poor woman was captured and tortured as a witch, and then the community took her in and looked after, and we set this to music, as you do. And speaking to the author of this, Mary Kidd, she was saying that traditionally these types of trials happened around times of social change. So thinking about the kind of social change we've had, like COVID, cost of living, and so on, who suffers disproportionately? It's marginalised groups. So in terms of supporting people when times are tough, you know, this stuff, the extra stuff that needs to be done. I don't actually have the answer. I'm just sort of expressing a pitfall and wanting to think about the more work we can do in that area, because once you achieve parity or you do better, it can go so quickly.
I think in terms of all of those pitfalls that you've spoken about, which I think are, you know, really key. The issue of the one person who does it all, or the notion of trying. I mean, I did some writing a while ago about diversity work, and kind of recommended that we should probably stop using the word entirely and replace it with the two words rigour and care. And, you know, I just argued just in short, that if an organisation or arts organisation is not rigorous about how they care and who they care about, they're not very good at their job. And I think from that point, you know, the pitfalls occur because there's a lack of rigour, and there's a lack of caring and a lack of care. And I think that it all speaks to that. So, you know, you're not supported by the people that are around you. That's a lack of care. You know, the notion that, you know, there's parity in in a group and then suddenly it drops off because you stop looking at it. That's a lack of rigour. And it's not to be negative to anybody, but it's just to say these things do happen, and I think one of the kind of conceptual pitfalls is that you have to keep trying to do it, but the mental strain of all of us having to think about it all the time is another load, and because it's the same sorts of people who have to think about it and are thinking about it, that actually homogenises that active space. So how do we make that? How do we gain some plurality in that space of the people who have to think about expanding that space for improvised music? Do you want to take a crack?
No, I like the phrase of expanding improvised music as well. I don't really... It's difficult because I think that in a space or an organisation, I don't really know much about organisations. I try to avoid them, and it's because of the sort of hierarchical thing. There's some way of distributing things, but it's just constantly making space for people. And I mean, at a certain point in your career, you're involved in nurturing others, and that's just how it is. It's sorry, difficult.
Let me just. Right, there's something that you've just said there that I think is really important. I was reading this really interesting book called The History of Masculinity,
right,
and by some French historian. He connects it all with the French Revolution, and he was pointing out in one of the early chapters of this book that the positions that women take within society and history are all to do with nurturing. And that it's part of a patriarchal cycle where the people who are placed to do that nurturing role are generally women, and I wonder about that in that sense, where that space. And it's not to say that men don't do that, because
they do. They absolutely do. But I think it's the patriarchy is also it's about squashing chances for men as much as that. So men who are more nurturing will face the similar comments and so on. But I think in terms of like carving out spaces, leading, it's not easy work. We're constantly writing funding applications. We're so busy doing the work, then we have to reflect and do all that. But it's a lot of labour, and not everyone wants to do that. Some people just want to show up and play, and that's completely fine. So I don't know what the answer is. It's just can someone pick it up, please?
Yeah. I mean, I guess
give me an answer.
I mean, when you talk about just wanting to turn up and just play, I mean, like my dream is one day. Like I'll have fixed enough problems or done my bit and have everyone else then doing the work, so I can literally just go back to just doing stuff. And like, I mean, it makes me think, Raymond, of like supervision meetings when it was like, it was like the entire thing was driven by a need to fight. And I couldn't just do... I always think about what my other PhDs might have been had I not had this sort of equality, diversity, inclusion be in my bonnet. Like, then and to watch other people's projects and she'd be like, imagine if I just didn't have to think about this stuff. If I could just be an artist or just be a researcher and just not have to take that on, which in a way makes me think that that's I've always felt, not always, have come to the conclusion that for me the solution is, especially if I think of it in real terms, at the MU for example, my job and the job of my team is, a team of two, is to get everyone, but eventually have everyone else in the organisation take responsibility for equalities work within their own remit. And I literally said this in my job interview and they keep quoting it at me now and I'm like, oops. But I was like, if I do this for 10 years and have everyone have it embedded, then I can leave John to stay there to kind of keep steering it. I don't want to be the head, I don't want his job. So when I come to the point where I'm like, right, everyone else is now doing this, I can go back and do, whether it's coming back into academia or whatever it is. But I said in my job interview, there's a point where I would like to have done enough that I can leave. I don't want to do equalities work for the rest of my life.
No one does.
No, but we will.
But we will. Yeah.
Of course we will.
Yeah, of course we will. Because we have to.
Yeah.
And it's in who we are.
Yeah.
Who we are sitting here. And I think most of the people in this room as well, because you're here. You clearly give a shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's in us. For sure.
Yeah, okay, but sorry, I haven't realised, I'm just like, but why should it have to be us? I mean, your job in the MU, it's a musicians' union, and if you're in the MU, then that means that it's a union, it's a workers' union. And so everybody should be in a union treated the same.
You'd think.
But they have what's it like working in the MU? That's what I wonder, from your point of view, in terms of the role and the job title that you have.
So I guess for context, I've been involved as an activist for a long time before I got the job. So I guess a lot of my experiences of the union in terms of engaging with members as well as staff has been from multiple vantage points. I guess to keep it concise and also not say too much would be to say there's always resistance to this work, and there will always be for a long time anyway, I expect there will be pockets of resistance, whether that is in terms of bringing my colleagues along with me now that I'm a colleague, or thinking about past members of staff, etc., who I encountered in the 10 years of being on committees, or engaging with other members, whether it's lay members, committee members, to people I've encountered. There has been resistance to this work. It's been seen as holding up progress, and my response to that has always been, we're a union, it's about fair work. We talk about fair as the word, fair for who? And that was the thing I used to always come back to, and the argument was, it's about fair work, so who is it fair for? Because surely the trade union movement should have had this built in from day one. And that's something, again, having been around a lot of wider trade union stuff, I see it across, all union work, that, you have, not always siloed, but we have these separate roles now for equalities work, instead of it being, surely there's like 200 years worth of it having, it should have been there, but it hasn't been.
Yeah. And then you get hired and you have to do all of that work.
Yeah. But what I do find interesting to with the MU is that they've seen it as an area of investment, and I think that has been a massive shift, even in the past couple of years.
Right.
I guess having Naomi at the top, because she was pushing equalities work throughout her time as a member of staff at the union, and so I think it's interesting when I think about the music industry more broadly, is that most of our kind of equivalent colleagues in other organisations, of course they're more kind of commercial industry organisations, but there's usually one EDI person, whether it's an officer or a lead or a manager or just whatever that, however senior or junior that position is, and however it's set up, there's usually one person. John has me and I have John. And it's got to the point now where I kind of see that also as us being a support system for all these other siloed people, because I've done that. I would not have applied if it was one role, even for the MU, having been involved for as long as I had been. If it was an isolated EDI role, I would have run away. I would not have gone for it. And so I do feel like there is a sense of that, and that part of the job has always been, it's been very clear that the job is to get everyone else on board, and that it gives us the capacity actually to do internal work. And that's, I think, the important thing in terms of like what I was thinking about earlier when you were talking about how you keep the momentum going with progress, and what happens when you see change and then it kind of goes back the other way. Is the only way to have that momentum is to not just think about the external work we do, but actually to be looking internally at everything from how we do staff recruitment and development to look at our own pay gap reporting, look at how our own staff experiences, looking at all of that, and creating change in the workplace culture. And it's only really, again, given that it's ironic, like being a union and unions aren't always great places to work in terms of what I've seen from the wider, from speaking to people who have been involved in other unions. But actually, if we're not doing that in our own houses as unions, if we're not looking at our own working experiences and workers' rights, then what change are we going to have for the people that we're meant to be serving as our members?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to pivot on to thinking about the study that was done. So that Diljeet and Mariam participated in terms of being commissioned for work. And Mariam, you've been commissioned many times for quite a few things, working with different ensembles. I think you've had commission. I think you've all been commissioned actually. Yeah, for theatre work and I read your website. You definitely have.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. You might not remember it, but and just thinking about the kind of barriers you encounter in commissions, and maybe there haven't been any, and it's all been absolutely lovely, and moving forward. And how are there any barriers? Is there like a hierarchy or a marginalisation or a sheltering that you perceive in being commissioned for new work?
Maybe I'll jump in, since I've clearly got the imposter syndrome of it. Were they really, basically the question would be like, were they really commissions though? And because again, it's like how we put things on our websites and our CVs and what they actually are. And because for me, having this commission was like, oh, this is serious stuff. Like that's been one of the kind of moments of going like, okay, I feel like I'm getting somewhere with it. And I think that in and of itself, especially when we think about who's involved, who's participating and who's not, and who's being excluded, is the whole system of that, and how we understand it ourselves, and I think that's kind of been a broader thing in terms of my relationship with improvisation as well, is how I've understood what that world is, and then how I become part of it. Does that make sense in terms of kind of even understanding like what counts as a commission or the language we use?
It's all very mysterious.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that mysterious. I mean, like a commission is just when somebody asks you to do something.
Yeah.
And then gives you money to do that thing, and usually it's a kind of boxed off project that you do it for. That's what it is.
Yeah, what I mean is mysterious is like who gets it, why they get it, what's going on, what's the that's the mysterious bit for me.
Right, yeah. So
why am I getting it? Is that a particular choice at a time? Is that it's
is that question you ask yourself, why am I getting it?
Not in a sort of bad way, but more that I'm just curious about the process of choice. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Do you have to say about that, Mariam? Or
I mean, I tend to find that I'll be asked to do something because someone's just seen me do it. And they go, I want that at my festival. And I go, okay, well, this is how much it's going to cost. And this is how long I want, and this is what I need, and this is my idea, and this is so I'm at that place in my career now. When I was younger, perhaps not so much. And I negotiate well now because I'm older and confident in this. Perhaps when I was younger, I didn't. So one of the things that I feel is very important in the commissioning process is transparency, which is something we keep hearing about in conversations. But one example is I'm working in a trio, and we performed recently, and we all got paid differently.
Ooh, that's interesting.
So that didn't go down well, let me tell you. Because I didn't get paid the most.
Yeah, I remember having
No, but seriously, like that has to be transparency.
Yeah,
I'm like, oi, it's a trio, we're equals here,
Yeah, but is that less common? I mean, that's how I like doing things. But working for with a collaborator and having a look at the kind of budget, and it's like the hierarchy of who gets paid what, and it was for an improvisation project, so a similar conversation.
Is it common? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the trio thing was a one-off.
Right, okay.
Bloody better pay. But like, Yeah, I mean, with conversations with other artists playing at the same festivals, generally, it seems to be the artists get paid the same.
Okay.
But I don't know, because I don't talk about everyone about what's happened.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm getting a message from another artist from the festival going, how much did you get? Because I only got blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, well. So, yeah. This is a very difficult conversation, isn't it?
I think
I'm glad I'm leading it.
But I think it's a difficult conversation because in the realms of jazz and improvised music, we don't talk about money.
Oh, right.
And no, this is a very, I mean, I think, I hope some of the musicians that are in that realm, I'll be completely frank. I am a promoter. I put on gigs. I've been promoting since 1995, and I've been doing it for a very, very long time. And the one thing that jazz musicians don't do, okay, I'm gonna reduce this into a ridiculous statement. Jazz musicians don't talk about money. Improvising musicians don't expect money.
Yeah.
And
yeah, okay.
and
yeah, I get that, yeah.
Right. So bands, the MU publishes its rates.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. and they can be a case for laughter, disdain, mirth, because they're terrible. And it's not your fault, but they are. They're terrible. And jazz musicians will do this haggling thing, where they'll go, oh yeah, can we have this? And promoters that are less scrupulous than me, I have fixed fees. I don't haggle with anyone. I don't care who you are. This is how much I can afford. This is what everybody gets. Every musician gets exactly the same. And that's the way I work it, and people who've booked by me, they know that that's what I do. Other promoters tend to go, well, you're not really that famous, so I think I'm just gonna. Oh yeah, and then people have got managers. They'll go, well, my guy is worth this much, and so there's this constant capitalist movement that goes through like the booking of gigs. Improv musicians, however, that's just downright exploitative, because we do gigs for no money, and we travel and we travel around the country, and and we do it because we love it. It's not about the money, so we kind of accept that. And this is another part of equality work, so like the project that I have down in Derby is called Out Front, and we focus on getting families to gigs to play improvised and to listen to improvised music, totally improvised music, and then I pay improvised musicians. And there was one band who, and I will stop talking because I realise I'm over-chairing, but there was one band who played for an hour, did an hour's gig, and then it was an hour's gig and they played for 45 minutes. They then said, oh, so shall we knock some off because we didn't play for the full hour? And that's where we are. Yeah. We've actually covered the last question on the sheet, but I think it'd just be really. There are lots of attendant problems within how we treat ourselves, and the space that we have, and in terms of booking. I know in terms of the show that I present, or the radio show. I have a radio show on Radio 3 called Freeness, and I did a bit of research in terms of what record labels send me in terms of gender, and it was bad. It was really bad. And I think, recordings, that's one way of accessing that music, accessing your music. And I know you've put out quite a few things lately, but, I was just wondering what opportunities you have to be commissioned, asked by record labels to put stuff out there, and whether there are barriers there?
I mean, I've never recorded anything, partly just because I'm really bad at organising it when I have a live gig, and partly because then the challenge of actually going and recording something, I've just never... I keep saying I'm going to do it. Again, it's something I've been saying for like 3 years, like, oh, I should really do something. And I think, I mean, I don't even think about that in terms of labels. I'm just like, I just need time and a bit of money to go and do something. I've not even, the idea of, and maybe that's to do with my knowledge of what labels would be interested in improvised music and that sort of thing. I mean, I did have an approach a couple of years ago, but it was from a new, very kind of small new label. And again, I've not really got around to doing anything about it, but it wasn't like, I don't know, it just didn't seem to be part of the machine, not the machine, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I guess my take on that is that's not even in my radar right now.
I mean, my experience of record labels isn't great. Where I had a label pick through probably about 30 to 40 tracks and then choose a certain number that they wanted to be as... So I don't believe that turntablism is a genre. I don't believe it is confined by the traits that we identify musical genres with, and I don't think it should. And record labels want to do that. Oh, sorry. Some record labels want to do that. I do not wish to identify as DJ Shadow. I don't wish to identify as Christian Markley. I don't wish to identify as Maria Chavez. I wish to identify as me. And whatever the hell I decide I want to do is what's going to happen. That's my terms in which I'm going to work. So I was in a conversation with a record label where I was having to compromise and make something more radio friendly, which was like, that's the end of this conversation, mate. I'm not making it to be radio friendly. If I was, I wouldn't call things what I call them. But you know this. Can't say half my titles on the radio. I really don't care.
Yeah.
I got a lot of space. Got a lot to say. Needs to be said.
Well, I don't mind it at all.
Thank you.
What about you?
Record labels. Tended to make record labels.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's at least two. And yeah, I don't know. It's like what's a function of putting the music out anyway. You know, I'm not doing it to make a lot of money. I'm doing it to get the music out there, for it to reach people and to be a document of the creative process at a particular time. So I guess in terms of commissioning for record labels, the industry's changed. Maybe you'll talk about this, you know, but the industry's a bit tricky now. I'm just wondering that, you know, if you're doing your own thing and you're proud of your product and it looks nice, and we used to do handmade records, we would literally like cut the things and print the CDs, CDR labels, Raymond a few years ago, and that's kind of more of what I'm interested in, rather than, because like I say, that's getting your own voice out into the world as it is, you know.
Yeah.
But I suppose, so commissioning comes from record labels and festivals and orchestras and so on. So I have experience with some, but that's all.
That's interesting. It's just one of those big problems for me still now. We get larger labels and smaller labels, and they'll just send through like a raft of men. And after I did the surveying, at least 2 of those labels stopped sending me anything at all. So there's work to do, and I guess, you know, in attitudes and changes in attitudes. I mean, one of my concerns is young people and how they access improvised music. You know, that sense of that Diljeet was talking about it not being a space for someone in it.
Don't have a sense of belonging. How do we make people feel belonged in our space?
Yeah.
That, you know the words.
Yeah, that sort of thing. So it's, you know, in terms of, I'm always interested to see young people listen to and how they engage with improvised music, and you know, most of them haven't built up the prejudice base, you know, to say, well, this is music and this is not music. And that goes to access as well. So, you know, kind of how do we how can we kind of work harder? I think the GeoFest is a great model for that, by the way. You know, the Geo Babies sessions that like, you know, but you know, wider world. You know, how do we do this better? Because it's great music.
I think people see the bits that they think are attractive, like, oh, creativity's super hot right now, you know, so that you try and extract that bit, and then what's the way of doing it? It's not about a list of exercises, it's about the relationships with the people, and the exercises are just a way to make relationships with people. But it's, when we're thinking about, you know, that bit you were talking about at the start, about how are we viewing, how's the world viewing improvisation, and what lens is that? It's, you know, you're extracting this bit and that bit, you're not getting what it is for me. So it's, I suppose there's more work to be done in, I don't know, I suppose it's what I'm actually researching right now, which is, you know, the interactional processes and these types of things, and the importance of the people and the relationships and the music that all happen together, you know.
I think there's something to be said about the importance of mentorship and allyship, which I think for me were hand in hand the same thing, and was very necessary for me. I was doing what I do now nearly 20 years ago, and I was trying to put it into a DJ competition hip hop scenario, and it didn't work. But what I did find was the right person who went, you're just in the wrong place. Just come do it here. And that person was a harpist. That doesn't even make sense still to me. Rodri Davis.
That makes perfect sense.
I've got a really wonderful story how he just turned up dripping wet at Durham University and was like, hi, I played a harp. I can't do a Welsh accent. Hi, I played a harp. Can I join in? And I was like, what? I got decks, mate. Do you not see I'm cool? He was like, yeah, I've just been on tour. What a tour, Yoshihide. And I'm like, that's not Q-Bert. That's not Mixmaster Mike, mate.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, okay, you need to check this out. He just kept going and he kept trying. And I was like, okay, yeah, he's cool. Yeah. Or I'll give it a go with a harp sometime. All right. And, but, you know, he got me. You know?
Yeah.
And he's an ally for someone for improv. And, like, he came from Newcastle to Durham, which is not that far, also the wrong city. Like, he didn't have to do that. And then again, I met another a lecturer from a different university who was like, just come and have a play at our lunchtime concert sometime. And I was like, what? My own tutors at university were not interested in me. 2 men, white men, who didn't have to help me out, and there was nothing dodgy at all going on. It was just like, you're good, you're into this, you fit actually what you're doing, come and try it in this space too. And they help facilitate that within their own privilege and share. So like for me that was a huge thing, because what I took from them, I've continued working with them for years and like help. I feel like it is a duty of mine to reach out, and I think I want to add this in, and you can tell me to shut up later if you need. We need to talk about hating. We need to talk about nastiness. And we need to talk about the need to be nice, the need to encourage, because I feel so much heat, especially online. And I hate it so much. I want to encourage other people, particularly women of colour, particularly working class, particularly isolated, particularly different instrument, not many of you in the band, if any. I want to go, yeah, man, you should be doing that. You should be, come have a go, come have a play. It would be great to see you. You need to record sometime, man. We need to get you in the studio. Those few words mean so much to people sometimes. Yeah. And it's so easy to go, oh, that was shit. Isn't it though? Like we do see things and go, well, actually, there is a space for all of us, because we all have our own way of doing things. I don't know. Maybe it's so simple. But I just feel like I need to say it.
Totally. No, I think as well, I mean, when I talk about my kind of imposter feelings when I'm in these spaces, and yeah, it's literally been like, I came to my first geo workshop in like 2013, I think. And that had been after kind of being aware of geo, because I was at Strathclyde, so Jerry had his improvisation ensemble, which I never did, because I just didn't get it, but that's because I'd had 6 years of being told as a flute player that you read, you don't try and learn don't try and learn your French romantics off the CDs, that is wrong. Because that's what I used to do. I was like, well, I've not got the sheet music, so I'm just going to learn this. I got in trouble for using my ears in school. We never improvised. You know, pretty much would have got in trouble. It would have been seen as messing around, I honestly think. And so I guess what all that to say is, for me, it's taken probably about a decade now of letting the walls down. Because I think that's the thing. The imposter syndrome isn't so much about what I've experienced in improvisation spaces. It's because I've come in with walls up, because that's what the previous 10 years of music education did. So it's taken me this long to trust that I've had the most amazing times in these spaces and being with other improvisers and being asked to do things, being asked to come and do gigs. Like, I have to pinch myself, and it's taken me this long to really, I think it's only really this year that I've actually felt like I can trust it. But that's just because there's been so much baggage before that. It literally, like, this is the first time I feel I literally finished writing a book chapter, or like a book thing, contribution for a book, last night. And at the end of it, I'm like, I think I can actually call myself an improviser now. And it's the first time I feel like I've been able to properly say that. Because I'm like, well, actually, this is what I do now. And when I think about it, I finally exist in a place that doesn't have all the toxicity that my flute training and school education did. But it's taken that long to do it.
It's important other people hear that.
It is.
They won't know that you felt that.
No.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's the disconnect, because actually when I see what Gio's doing, and it's like, I can, and now that I trust it as well, which is on me. That's It's not to say it wasn't to be trusted. It's more just that's my stuff.
Yeah.
But I guess for all of the things that you're trying to do to open this space, there will be lots of people who are like me, just being like, oh, but it's going to just be like all the other things I've done where I can't, and it's that.
But here's
really
where that persistence that Roger Davis had, and going back to the nurturing thing as well, that's patience to kind of develop these relationships.
But I also feel like I've had that with you, because I feel like it's been that constant. When I actually think back to it, there has been a kind of a gradual, like, we're just going to come and get you again and just pull you back in, and it's paid off. Yeah. Because I now actually feel like I'm not an outsider coming in. Yeah. But it is, for all the, there's lots of other me's out there, I guess. And it's just how we get them in.
Yeah.
There are.
Yeah. Well, I think that's actually a good place to do it, because you've talked for 50 minutes. So we've got,
excuse me.
if you'd like to ask any questions or make comments, lovely check scarf in the middle there.
I was just like, so all these kind of conversations, I totally I get them, but the question is, how can you summarize like actions that are simple actions that we can all do, that we can take away into our homes, unions, and make the change? Like, I know that's a really stupid question, but it's also like the simplicity of like things that we can all embed into our heads, and every day we can do them, practice them.
I guess
in order to get that change out.
Yeah. So it's funny. I literally was in this very room like 2 months ago or something, and I'm pretty sure I had the same conversation about like microactivism and what are the little things that we can actually do with it. Because I think even when we think about mentorship, I'm like, oh, but I don't have the, where am I going to find the hours it takes to get a mentee and take them along? And actually, it's the little things. It's the fact that we now know each other and we've known each other, and and it's just the it doesn't have to be the big thing. Yeah. I think, and actually, like, for me, I mean, for example, like Gio could do all the advertising about come and do this and that it wants, but that's not going to make me necessarily come along. Yeah. But having Una say, hey, just come on, it'll be fun. That's going to have, and it's that gradual it's the relationship. But you said it earlier, it's relationship building. But I think for me that can be small. It doesn't have to be organising a big networking session or starting a charity or doing it. It doesn't have to be any of those things. It's as simple as seeing someone and just noting to keep an eye and do that.
Say hey.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have simple solutions, very quickly.
No, that's what
But I do have answers. And for me, I just don't understand how on this earth any gig can be curated, programmed, and it's not 50-50 male, female and gender expansive. I literally don't understand how. So 'cause the answer to that is, if it isn't 50-50, that means there's a bit of hard work to do. Then do it.
It's not
That's it.
particularly hard.
just do it.
It's not.
Well, no, I mean, but it
it's
means
not
like
particularly hard.
literally curators that live a street away from where I am, who have millions coming in every year, are still putting all male white bills on. And I go, oh wait, shit, you get paid to do this job. It isn't hard to do a Google.
Yeah.
I do it. You could do it on the loo. You know. It's like So I think there's some work that has to be done. But I suppose maybe the simple answer is be mindful. Always be mindful. And if you're going to be running all female and gender expansive, do you have to tell everyone, or can it just be the norm? It's well sexy when it's just the norm.
Can I just quote somebody that's offered an answer? George Lewis wrote an article a couple of years ago called New Music Decolonisation in 8 Difficult Steps. I just read out as 8 steps because they offer a possibility. So, hang on. Move beyond kinship, invest in new populations, give up on meritocracy, diversify school music programmes, encourage ensembles to commission, make decolonisation explicitly foregrounded part of cultural policy, internationalise music curation decisions, encourage media discussions of new music decolonisation and change of consciousness. So he's got a paragraph under each of them, but that was his answer to that question.
Oh, fluffy scarf.
Yeah, it's some of the stuff has really resonated with me, but I just wanted to add 2 pitfalls which I think are really important and which have kind of affected my sound practice and holding of sound spaces. And one of those is tokenism. I find it also that people think having one bill that suits this like tick box category is enough, and then I feel that the care of that is not kept going. And the other is actual. I've got a lot of resentment towards institutions, academic institutions, because I feel like a lot of people. Basically, I feel like they're the big business of this kind of generation, and I feel like they're not trickling that money out at all. And I know people who worked in institutions, academic institutions, who never pay out, who never go to grassroots organisations, never give money out outside of their peer group or their academic institutions as well. So I feel like they've got a lot to be attacked for, really. So I'm not so negative. I also believe that there's an abundance and that we will prevail. But
They're 2 really good points, actually. Tokenism is a huge one.
Yeah.
It's massive.
Yeah,
sure.
There were a couple of things which have cropped up throughout the whole discussion, and it seemed to, correct me if I'm wrong, but the notion of ownership. Who owns the music? Who owns your practice? Is it, that disgraceful story from your school? That's I'm not in my day job, which I've just retired from. We were involved partly. We did a whole lot of stuff, but we were involved in doing music with people with learning disability and autism. And the key to it, I think, was, and it's not universally done in community music, was the notion of ownership. That it was their music. It wasn't something we were coming along with a few chord sheets and some shakers and getting people to do. They were inventing their own music and bringing it forward themselves. That's where the success, when it was successful, but stuff you were saying earlier on about maintenance and constant vigilance and constant renewing that George was talking about as well, that has to be done, otherwise it just becomes part of the institution. It just becomes institutionalised, and the institution takes ownership of it.
Yeah.
Even to the extent of saying, "Oh, look how open and accepting we're being by owning this music," when it's not theirs to own.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well.
I kind of have a few things to respond to with the tokenism and the idea of institutions and things. And is that all right or no?
Yeah, no,
or
it's absolutely fine. But briefly, because there's another question coming.
Okay.
But go for it. Yeah.
Tokenism is something I constantly battle, and it's not just institutions. I'd really like to talk to you more about it later, because I think you need to keep yourself centered as the powerful figure in that conversation. Utilize it and use it, and I wouldn't be frightened to say, I realise you're tokenizing me. I know that you're inviting me, or I know why this is happening. You can use it to your advantage. Be aware of that. In terms of institutions, have you read anything by Fred Moten? I work within an institution, and I bend over backwards to do my very best to make sure we do our best philanthropically, equitably, and I understand the need, having been that person at grassroots for so long. And I am my EDI rep in my music department. So I'm savage when I go in. I hear you, and there's a lot of work to be done all over the place. The word I would use is accountability, and transparency is needed for us to be able to see that. But I wholeheartedly stand by Fred Moten. We can and we should steal from the institution, which in whatever way is necessary, to get and to give to the community. I believe that. I do that.
Yellow scarf and gloves.
Yeah, thanks for the discussion so far. I totally agree that I think mentorship and allyship is vital, and that allyship, if it's done well, takes the pressure off all of us, so that we can all make things better. I'm interested about structures, and I'm from a classically trained background, and in a previous job worked a lot with an organisation which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, called Black Lives in Music, and I know that at the moment they're doing a lot of work to address the hideous practices and mass inequality that exists in the classical music sector, which is bullshit and needs a lot of work, but there is structure there, and so their recent initiative was to invite global majority musicians to audition for orchestras and to get agreement with orchestras that that's something that they'll put in place. So there are, whether we like them or not, there are centuries-old structures in place that support that music, and to an extent there is in other music, which doesn't really exist in the improvised music world. So beyond allyship and mentorship, it's how do we enact that? It's back to this question of what strategies, what actual tangible action can we take to try and diversify. I'm thinking of like an orchestra like Chineke, which is an orchestra classical orchestra set up with global majority musicians. And I'm not sure if there's an avenue or something to learn. Well, I'd be intrigued to see from the panel if there's anything you feel that could be learnt in an improvisation context from that ensemble. And what if you, because the irony is that improvisation in a free improvisation is this democracy in music. It's absolutely open. But do you feel that there are any barriers within the specific genre of improvisation, to bring it back to diversifying improvisation, that are maybe barriers to true diversity? So I guess my two questions are, is there anything to learn from that Chineke model? And are there any intrinsic barriers to broader diversification? Or
can I get a second one?
As you say, Corey.
Let's quickly get the second one. I don't think, I'm going to disagree with you about the second point. I think there are hierarchies in free improvisation. And I think we have to be aware of them. Not always.
Sorry, I meant purely within the sound world. I absolutely.
No, I mean the sound world as well. No, I don't think improvisation's hierarchy free. I think, but it shifts. It's a kind of like flexible hierarchy, but that's all I had. That was my burning thing to say.
I guess in terms of barriers, because that's something I guess I can say I feel like I've faced. And I guess I'll thread different things together. I think when we talk about things like Chineke, for me, if I was in school and was I was in school trained to be a flute player, had that orchestra existed, I think there would have been, and had my teachers been aware, I think there might have been a different approach to thinking about what my potential was. But that inherent idea of, well, you're not going to fit in there, that's straight off the bat, there's a barrier. You know, if you're not, you know, it was never suggested to me that I'd become a performer. It wasn't suggested to me that I go to university and study music. You know, I mean, and again, obviously we're talking mid-noughties, but, you know, guidance counsellors were like, music teacher, music therapist. I was like, they are completely different things, but okay then. If that's the only advice I'm getting, fine. You know, and I think there are, just, you know, at a very surface level, there are benefits to the visibility that's created through that. We, obviously at the MU, we work really closely with Blim, so we've been doing all the orchestral recruitment work with them, which has been really interesting, just in terms of watching people come on the journey, actually. And I think one of the bigger, I guess, barriers or things that kind of stop the work from happening is when we try and do things quickly. Whereas actually the 10-point plan for orchestral recruitment has been, I mean, I've been at the MU just over a year now. Conversations were going before then. We're maybe now getting close to having a finished thing, but that's after months and months and months of sitting down with with players, with management, with reps. You know, it's been a long process that has required actual buy-in from the orchestras, from the ABO. And I suppose that's an example of taking the time to do it properly, which I think can be transferred to other situations. Kind of going back to education, I think we do, I mean, I don't know what it's like now. It's been a long time since I was in school. And so I think but I do think if the teachers that were there when I was there are still there, which they will be, then I do think there are attitudinal things around how people approach improvisation, whether it's, you know, free improv, jazz, whatever it is. I do still think there will be a generation of teachers who are resistant to it because it's not what they know. It's the same with composing. We literally, I was the generation where there was computers all of a sudden, so they just literally made us sit the mouse, not even a keyboard, with a mouse and manually input the notes. We never heard those pieces out loud. Oh, never, like not on an instrument, never. Like MIDI thing. There was it was like very, very basic Sibelius. But I remember being given like my higher concepts on a tape that they taped over the previous higher year, so like only a couple of years ahead of me, live recording of their composition work. And I was like, how's like I technology's great, but that completely changed our experience of writing music. And it comes back to things like ownership and whether we actually feel like we're doing the thing. And I think that's a fundamental problem with a lot of kind of early music education experiences, is that we don't identify with our practice at an early stage. Maybe that, I don't know whether it's just me, but like I feel like I didn't even really identify as a performer. I didn't have the confidence to identify as a performer or a writer or an improviser or any of these things. Like it certainly not until it was well beyond making career decisions. You know, I don't know. I feel like I've been on a tangent. So,
oh, good. I think it's very interesting asking about the Chineke orchestra. I think it's a two-prong solution there. I'm very pro-mixed. I think we need to address the fears and concerns people have, those who are already in ensembles, and to say that this is not about taking, this is about multiplying and joining and sharing. I like to say there's room at the table for everyone. It's not just a meal for one. And just to remember that this isn't about stealing from someone, this is about making more wonderful things happen. It would kill me to be in an ensemble that was just people of colour. I just don't know why, but there's something for me to answer later. I want to be in an ensemble because I'm the right person to be in that. That's just me being an idealist. I am in the ensembles I'm in because I am the person to be in them. I happen to be in a trio. It happens to be a trio of women who also happen to be women of colour. But the main thing was it was about music. So I don't think there's just one solution. I think there's two. Barriers, ones we need to remember. We know certain ones and ones that get forgotten. I think equity is something we need to be considering. That's something that in Newcastle I found was so important. The biggest barrier a lot of young musicians and artists were having was just being able to access a space with a PA and a bit of privacy for a few hours without having to like fork out 25 quid. Because when you don't have it, you don't have it. And that just like that's a huge barrier. And there's only so many times you can hear it in headphones or in a little speaker or this breaks or like, so just affording space in that kind of way is such a huge gift. Remembering people of all ages need to be involved, not just young or not just retired or not just, you know, like intergenerational and these things, keeping these things consciously. I think we do have to be very honest about money and about finances and considering things equitably. I believe everyone in the room will understand all of those reasons why. It's something that from a working class background, living in a working class area is something that's very important for us to be considering, because sometimes it's surprising to find out who's being held back. And there are others who are very willing to help and support and to say, you know, I can chip in a bit more for this or for that person. And, you know, there are ways to deal with those things that I think are very important. Peter, I could talk to you about this for a long time, so I won't right now. But yeah, I think there's a lot of different answers.
And I think that multiplicity of answers, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming. It's been really enlightening, and actually just to hear like the different issues and to just air them out is productive enough. So thanks to our panel, and thank you for coming.